te whare karakia tunei, te whare hato mateo, tēnā koe. E nā piopa, ko tamai neo tēnei ata, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I te kaikaranga, waiora, whaia waiora, mo tō karanga mo tō mihi kia mātou, tēnā koe, tēnā koe, tēnā koe. E te whanui o te mihana o Tamaki Makaurau, ko tamane o tēnei ata, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Never would have I ever dreamed that I would have the privilege of standing in this place on this day to acknowledge an incredible history, an incredible time, an incredible group of people who've walked the streets of Auckland for over 100 years. It's my privilege to acknowledge this place, which has been part of the mission since our very foundation 100 years ago. I acknowledge the vicar here, Reverend Helen Jacobi, who has invited us to be here on this day. Trinity Sunday, I acknowledge our own Trinity behind me, our three bishops who are here. What incredible for us. There's huge poignancy in this, particularly to have our chair, Bishop Jim, with us this morning, celebrating, thanking with us all this morning. I acknowledge the congregation of St. Matthew's who have stood with us in good times and in bad over 100 years, in different ways. We cannot express our gratitude enough to this community for all that you have done with us and for us over these 100 years. It is fitting that we're here amongst you today. We are soon to hear two readings from Scripture, historical readings, which I won't quote from, but I would quote from another piece of history, which is yet to be published. It will be another important historical document, hopefully, in our country. It's called Agency of Hope. It is the history of the Auckland City Mission, and it's been written by Peter Lynham, and I acknowledge you here this morning, Peter, and your work in bringing this together, and it will be published at the end of the year. In one of the early chapters, and I'd like to quote you, you say, "The beginnings of the Auckland City Mission have a legendary quality, as Jasper Calder made them so from the outset. At annual commemorations, the story was told and retold. It is now time to trace the parts of the story which have been forgotten." And I think what Peter may have been alluding to there is something that I speak frequently of, and that is the danger of the single story. There is no one story about any of us, about the people we serve, about the people that are often called clients of the mission, people who are often framed and stereotyped and judged. There is no one story. There is no one story of the Auckland City Mission, how it was founded, why it was founded, who did what, where, when, and how. And there's no one story of our life over 100 years. There are simply many stories. Each of them may be right, but always remember there are other stories, some we know and some we will never know. The story of the City Mission always must be known and taken in the context of the time. If you do not know the context, you can't understand what happened. The Auckland City Mission was one of several in the 1920s of religious-based organisations providing relief for Auckland's needy. Remembering in 1920 Auckland was a city coming out of the Great Spanish Flu, where thousands died in 3 months, and the First World War. To a greater or lesser extent, all relief agencies shared a common ideology and precedents. In New Zealand, sporadic efforts by usually one or two energetic and zealous individuals had seen the establishment of evangelical missions dedicated to taking the God and the moral values of the middle class to the unchurched urban poor and working class. In many cases, these organisations also assumed the role of charitable agencies. A combination of precedent, Jasper Calder's own energy and zeal, moral concerns of the time, and some sympathetic clergy saw the realisation in 1920 of the Auckland City Mission. Reverend Jasper Calder was appointed the curate of this church, St Matthew's, in 1914, and served here until October 1919. During his time here, Calder volunteered, but was rejected as unfit for service in the New Zealand Army at the outbreak of World War I. Calder later condemned the hypocrisy of war. He said, "If we can muster our best resources to kill, surely we can do the same to save." This prompted him to resume his interest in helping the needy in this area, especially those in front of courts. In 1919, the vicar here of St Matthew's, Reverend Gillam, died, and the fact that Calder was not appointed the vicar created, shall we say, a storm in Auckland, well publicised, which led to the now famous or infamous choir strike here at St Matthew's. Calder's appointment in December 1919 to revive the dead Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Khyber Pass was a turning point. In the few months Calder was at Holy Sep, he set the place alight, not literally, but figuratively, and people came from all over the city to hear him and his sermons. That pleased some, but for others it was seen as a travesty. And he was actually, his mission in that church was ceased rather suddenly. He was pushing for church reform. He was dismissed and joined the very select group of unemployed clergy. This enabled him, however, to focus on the establishment of the city mission, and his subsequent appointment as the first city missioner by the bishop. He held that position for 26 years. The mission started as an evangelical movement, essentially for those Calder called the underdog. Calder was a man of strong, if not always coherent, convictions, which he frequently expressed with disregard for the consequences. He quickly gained a reputation for being unorthodox and a troublemaker, something which tended to alienate his peers and superiors. He identified particularly with the underdog, those mostly Pākehā men, neglected by the more traditional precincts of the church. Calder identified strongly with the Anglican Church and the Anglican faith, viewing with suspicion the ecumenical movement that was beginning in Auckland at the time. He argued for a more equitable treatment of the working class and the poor in the terms that could be described as Christian socialist. Yet he was anti-socialist in the political sense. He was a man who made many enemies as friends and as well as friends, and who had the drive and wit to build up one of the most significant welfare agencies in Auckland during his tenure as city missioner. Calder began the evangelical services of the mission at the Princess Theatre, which was the largest public building in Auckland at the time, on the evening of Sunday, the 6th of June, 1920. The theatre was completely packed out, with hundreds turned away at the door. It was not a typical church congregation, for it was working class and poor, with a significant proportion of men. A choir of 30 voices led the singing, a musical soloist performed, and Calder spoke on the subject of make or break. That's a hint for you, Bishop Jim, for your sermon. In reading the early history of the mission, it's interesting to me how quickly the mission and the missioner, once entering into a relationship and understanding the lives of the people who were coming to their service, moved away from being an evangelical organisation to a large social service organisation, and Calder became a social worker. He immediately rented an office in Albert Street, and here he interviewed people who were in financial need, about to be charged in court. He stored stocks of food for the hungry and sent those needing clothes to his social worker, Sister Esther. The mission quickly moved to 5 Queen's Building in Wellesley Street and expanding into 5 large rooms. A little chapel was dedicated to the patron of the Auckland City Mission, St. Francis of Assisi. While men seem to predominate in our history, as it is often written, it is important to note the role of women in the mission from the very beginning. Sister Pat, Patricia Jeffs, was appointed immediately as the informal deaconess. She quickly established her presence in the mission, attending the police court, visiting sick people and children in need. In the first 9 months of the mission, she took on a caseload of 150. She developed her own distinctive ministry to women, even rescuing shoplifters. She resigned after a serious illness in 1935. And interesting enough, 20 years later, Calder married her soon after the death of his first wife and shortly before his own death. And for the rest of that story, you'll have to wait and read Peter Lyon's book. Worth waiting for. So that's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is continue to do what you've done for the last 100 years and walk with us. The mission story is still being told. It's not over. It's not history. It's being told on a day-to-day basis through the mahi of our 175 staff, through our hundreds of volunteers, through our thousands of donors. It's being told in the building of our new building, Mission Home Ground, next door. That's our centennial project. I'd like to conclude with words that we often use from the well-known Māori leader, Sir James Centenary. Tāwhaki rawa tau haerenga aki te kore hairu tonu. We have come too far not to go further. We have done too much not to do more.
And in that kai we have connected with each other, we have laughed, we have cried, sometimes we have fought, then we have reconciled, and we get up again.
For all those who live in fear of the other, those who fear the rich, those who fear the poor, those who fear the powerful, and those who fear the many powerless, and especially at this time, those who live with racial fear. God of love, reach all, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, those of all faiths, and those with no faith. We pray for a peace that erodes fear, so that your love can banish hate, so that no human is hurt through fear of the other.
We pray for the Church. We pray for your strength to hold each of us, of our worshipping communities and our leaders, by the task of calling out injustice, to speak out with voices that are persistent and unambiguous. Teach us to overturn the tables and tear down the fences that stand in the way of the hungry and homeless, the marginalized and the powerless. We pray for the Anglican Church in Mexico and Papua New Guinea.
We pray for those in need, those who are homeless, who live with constant hunger, those who live with addictions, and those in poor health. We pray for those whom we know who are having trouble with their relationships, who have lost their jobs, and in some cases lost hope. We remember those who have died. Especially today, we remember former volunteers and staff of the mission. Gail, who would never take no for an answer. Dimitri, who settled among us with great integrity. John, whose laugh was infectious. Liz, who for years found a corner in an old pub to work on the books. Barbara, who for years was a comforting, familiar presence in detox. And Eric, who knew every name and drop-in. Matt, whose medical skills eased the passing of many in Herne Bay House. And Ivy, who comforted patients and brooked no interference from hospital authorities. These are just a few. We remember their contributions, we remember and acclaim them, and the many who preceded them. We remember them and give thanks. We are humbled in the knowledge that they chose the mission to contribute to your work, Creator. We give thanks for those who support the work of the mission. Creator, we humbly commend to you those who give of their wealth, those who give despite having little, those who are recognized in our community and those who are anonymous. Their gifts and cash or kind allow your work to continue. Creator, lead us to care for one another as you love us, and to share our wealth as you shared the wealth of your blessing.
We remember today Ini Kupuria, founder of the Melanesian Brotherhood in the Solomon Islands. We give thanks for the life of Jasper Calder, who 100 years ago yesterday called together the women and men of Auckland to give form to his hope that a body of like-minded people would band together to help relieve the poverty and the degradation of many Auckland citizens. Jasper may have been a thorn in the side of those with power. He may have had little regard for conventional manners or the opinions of the straight-laced. But he did create a legacy likely to last for at least 200 years or more. We pray for the current mission staff and their families, for our CEO and all his leadership team, for our board and foundation members and chairpersons. We pray for all our volunteers whom we could not manage without. Creator, hold us all when we tire. comfort us when we are in distress, and bless us. And bless us all kindly. We pray for those who just want their lives to be better.
Creator, I ate a hot meal last night, yet there are many in the city who did not.
Creator, I slept in a warm bed last night, yet there are many in this city who didn't.
Creator, I had a hot shower last night, yet there were many in the city who did not.
Creator, I slept very peacefully last night, yet we know that there are many in this city who did not.
God of love, we give thanks for food, for warmth and secure shelter, and remember those who do not enjoy these things that we take for granted. We pray for our own needs. Christ, Isaiah tells us to share our food with the hungry, to give shelter to the homeless, and to give clothes to those who need them. In the same breath, he also told us not to hide from relatives who need our help. At times, we're good at hiding. At times, we often fail to remember that through you, we are all whānau. Christ, we pray that you move us to reach out to our relatives as you reached out to the poor, the marginalised, and the despised. Amen.
Memory is hazy. Somehow I never got to say farewell to you. It's been a long, lonely path for you. I was keeping all my thoughts inside when I saw you on the street tonight. Oh my, it's like staring at an empty page when the story's gonna have to be made. Hoping that you find your way. I'm hoping that you find your way back. Hoping that you find your way back home in time, in your own time.
We are related. I could be the one that could clear a path for you, instead of the one that would look away from you. Never mind if you care, love will always find you there. Coming in on a wing and a prayer.
Hoping that you find your way. I'm hoping that you find your way back. Hoping that you find your way back home in time. Yeah, I'm helping you to find your way, and knowing that you'll get there one day. Helping you to find your way back home in your own time. In your own time. Someone I knew, I'm sending out a smile to you.